Hello and welcome. You're watching Newsx with me, Devika Devan. Sergio Gor's confirmation hearing on Capitol Hill has put the spotlight firmly on the future of U.S. India ties. Testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the ambassador-designate struck an optimistic note, saying Washington and New Delhi are not that far apart on a deal on tariffs and predicting a resolution in the next few weeks. Gor underscored that America's relationship with India is a strategic partnership that remains much warmer than their ties with China. That optimism comes against the backdrop of mixed signals from U.S. President Donald Trump. In the days after the SCO summit in Tianjin, where Prime Minister Modi was seen alongside Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, Trump blasted the trade relationship as a totally one-sided disaster and complained that India's tariffs had been the highest of any country. He even warned that they now have offered to cut off their tariffs to nothing, but it's getting late. They should have done so years ago. On social media, he went further, declaring, and I'm quoting here, "Looks like we've lost India and Russia to the deepest, darkest China." Yet Trump also moved quickly to reassure New Delhi, calling India-U.S. ties very special, stressing that he would always be friends with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But where exactly does the trade deal stand today, and what do we make of President Trump's latest comments? I have with me
Senator, President Trump has been crystal clear on this. They must stop buying Russian oil. Possibilities are endless, Senator, as you pointed out. We fully intend in these trade talks that are ongoing right now to open the markets to crude oil, petroleum products, liquefied natural gas. You're talking about a population of 1.4 billion individuals there. Their middle class, by our definition, is larger than the entire United States of America. And so we have countless possibilities to expand into those markets, and we fully intend to do that. Our relationship with the Indian government, with the people of India, extends many more decades, and it's a much warmer relationship than they have with the Chinese. Frankly, they are concerned by Chinese expansionism. And Chinese expansionism is not just on the border of India, it's all over the area. And so we share a lot in common, and we share a lot of the same concerns that other nations in the region do.
All right, joining us on the broadcast is Ambassador Suresh Kumar Goyal, Dr. Shahid Kohli, Rabindra Sachdev and Professor Madhav Nalapal. Let me begin with Ambassador Goyal. Ambassador Goyal, your first thoughts on this latest signal coming in from the United States of America?
How long do I have? The first thoughts are not really the first thoughts, but they have been brewing for a long time. Devika, thank you very much. I have one or two thoughts here really. First of all, Mr. Gor, while deposing in front of the Senate, he did talk about that, yes, the trade deal is being talked about and they hope to conclude it soon, etc., and that how important the India-USA relationship is. At the same time, there is again a kind of a stark ultimatum to India that there will be no trade deal unless we stop buying oil from Russia. That stands. And that is where it was even before the trade deal discussions had stopped. So I do not know what to make of it, number one. Number two, again, there is an issue of really China. That because China is on the path of expansionism, and therefore India is important for the USA to counter China. And also that India is being looked at in terms of the huge middle class market, which according to the American standards is more than what the American size of population is. If we have to look at the purchasing power, maybe the market will be smaller than the USA, but nonetheless, in terms of population, it is more than USA. My concern really is that the factors which had led to the downward trend in the India-US relations, they still remain very, very important in the minds of those who are close to President Trump, including Peter Navarro, including the Commerce Secretary, including Robert Gore. And even if President Trump keeps on saying how keen he is to have conversations with Prime Minister Modi, At the same time, his team continues to be really issuing these kind of, including the ambassador designate, so to say. They continue to issue these kind of warnings to India. I do not know what to make of it. Also, please remember that they have their President Trump is urging Europe to put 100% tariff on India, on India's, because India is importing oil from Russia. This again is a media report, maybe wrong, maybe right, but this is what we say. Uh, my concern really is maybe for whatever reason, President Trump wants to have a better relationship with India. But the team of President Trump, including his ambassador designate, does not seem to be indicating giving any indications in that direction. I will have to wait for those indications to know that yes, we are going to have a sound relationship. Last point really here is, I think we had become so totally US centric in our relationship that President Trump could use that US centricity to threaten India and say that yes, in case you do it, then you have all this tariff. If we are going to become US centric again, are we going to to suffer the same kind of situation again, being threatened? I think it's better for us really to have a multilateral engagement. Sorry, not multilateral, but engagement with in a multipolar world with different countries, along with an autonomy to be able to take our decisions. And we know where our interests are. We want to have good relations with the USA. We have said it very often. But that relationship with the USA cannot be that of a supplicant and a provider. It has to be an equal relationship. Devika.
All right, Professor Madhav Nalapat, your thoughts on the same, because it has been slightly confusing so far. What exactly does the US want? But a lot has changed since the SCO summit, and we do hear some change in tone ever since then. But what do you make of the latest commentary that's coming out of the US?
Look, the fact of the matter is that, I don't know about any separation between Donald Trump and his team, for a simple reason that if his team had any separation from Donald Trump, they would not be in the team for very much longer. They would be immediately dismissed. Otherwise, I agree with Ambassador Goel's comments. I would only like to point out that Sergio Gor has got to be confirmed. He's got to have a majority in the in the Senate voting him in. And I think he's saying the right things to ensure that he is confirmed. But the reality situation is, within 24 hours of his landing in Delhi and settling in Roosevelt House, he's going to understand that it's absolutely no go for India to stop buying Russian oil. We're not going to snap a relationship going back from the 1950s on the whim of anybody in 2025. And I can tell you that Prime Minister Modi is absolutely firm on that. There's not going to be any question of any concession on that, for a simple reason that they talk about the 1.4 billion people of India. Well, they depend on cheap energy. If the US can have a long-term or even a medium-term, say 5-year or 4-year contract for supply of oil at a price lower than that of Russian crude, and if their quality is equivalent to the same crude, then I think our refineries would not mind shifting. But those are to be done by economic ways and not by coercion. Coercion never works, I can tell you. And on the one hand, Donald Trump is talking about deepest, darkest China. On the other hand, he's strengthening the hand of China by basically infuriating Indian public opinion against him. If he were to make a visit in India, frankly, I think there'd be, there would be expressions of protest, although of course they would be peaceful and they'd be well disciplined. But the reality is that Donald Trump has confused those in India who were his supporters for a long time. He has confused friends in America who have been his supporters for a long time. And I think, as far as ambassadors, Gore is concerned, let him be confirmed first, then he becomes ambassador. Let him take up residence in Roosevelt House. I think he will understand the realities very, very clearly. And yes, I fully agree that in Trump's description of China, as far as the US is concerned, as far as India is concerned, as you can see, the Indo-Pacific, the Chinese expansionism is a fact of life, and India and the US must work together. But they must work together as co-equal partners. You know, in the First World War, the First Cold War, China was with the US, but it was sui generis. It stood by itself. It did not stand like a European ally or Japan or doing the US bidding to a considerable extent, but did its own bidding, and at the same time, where it mattered to China, supported the US. For example, China was very much against the Soviet Union. Mao Zedong, totally disliked the Soviet Union, and he said they are revisionists, they have revised communist doctrine, they are paper tigers, all kinds of very abusive things about the Soviet Union. So he had an interest in joining hands. As far as we are concerned, we are not being abusive towards China, but the reality is that the Chinese have multiplied their presence throughout South Asia, and they have been propping up regimes that are not at all friendly to India. Oli just had to quit. Oli was very hostile to India, very close to China. So were the Rajapaksa brothers. So the reality of the situation is, of course, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it is inexplicable why President Trump is so friendly with Pakistan, unless you can explain the Qatar connection. And frankly, Israel has punctured the value of that connection for a simple reason. Netanyahu knows that Qatar is close to Donald Trump. Qatar has given him a new Air Force One, but still, they went ahead and bombed in Doha, the headquarters of what they believe. The floors that were headquarters of what they believe were the leadership of elements of Hamas. So the fact of the matter is, if Donald Trump has India on his side, then he is secure. His country is secure in the Indo-Pacific. If India is pushed away by this kind of absolutely unreal policy that we have not seen in U.S. presidents, and policy that we would not tolerate 1 second, especially
Yes.
Prime Minister Modi. So the reality situation is, yes, they do need us, we need them, but we have got to be sui generis. We are too big to be counted among the allies of the U.S. We are sui generis, a partner of the U.S. in securing the Indo-Pacific, the way China was in defeating the Soviet Union during Cold War 1.0.
All right. Sharad Kohli, bringing you into the conversation here. Sharad, I want to then understand from you. Now, Sergio Gor has come and stated that it's a much warmer relationship with India than with the Chinese, and that this relationship is going to go on for decades. But just today, reports have come in of President Donald Trump likely to be asking the G7 members to impose higher tariffs on both India and China in light of both the nations buying Russian oil. So this is what I want to understand from you. How do you think we need to now navigate this situation with the US? Because it seems like they've, as far as a one-on-one is concerned, taken a much softer tone after the SCO. So some message has gone to the White House, to the president and the people. But it seems as though there is still an attempt to create pressure on India and China, this time through the G7.
Good evening, Devika, to you, my fellow panelists and Newsx viewers. I think confused is one word which can be aptly used for President Trump at this point of time. He's not very sure. He calls India a friend, and then he goes on to say that Europe must impose 100% tariffs on India and China. Then he calls Prime Minister Modi as his friends, and he says India levies highest amount of tariffs. For his information, the average tariffs we were levying on American goods into India were barely 16, 17%. Apart from things like Harley Davidson and so, most of the products were coming at 16, 17%. So I think he's misinformed as well, as for all probably the statements are coming in a manner to probably, blow over the whole thing. So I think confusion is there. As far as India's navigation is concerned, I think India is very clear on its stance. We have left the doors open. We have left the windows open for negotiations. We heard the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal saying that by November, the deal might happen. So are the Americans saying that negotiations are on. We are talking to, but then people like Peter Navarro have to stop, issuing statements like India being a laundromat and India being Modi's war and stuff like that. I think all these things have to stop. I really don't think, Devika, at this point, the entire White House is in sync. And Sergio Gor, if you see, I see some missing synchronization between the different officials of White House, between the ambassador. So it all seems very confused. They have to be very sure what they want to do. India has gone to the China. First of all, India has been non-aligned for times immemorial now. India doesn't believe in taking sides. India stands with truth. India believes in one-on-one relationship. We don't believe in groupism. We may be member of various groups like Quad and, BRICS, but we don't believe in groupism as is being projected. And India has gone to China's side and this and that. Prime Minister went there to attend an SCO summit, of which India is a member. So are simply attending the summit that, India has fallen into the lap of China, the darkest China. I think these statements do not carry any relevance as far as India is concerned. We don't give any importance or significance overly to the way they have been expressed. So White House needs to be clear on where it wants to go. India is very clear on its tariffs. There is a red line drawn. We cannot allow agri and dairy. We are clear about it. We are not going to stop buying oil from Russia. Sometime I heard a statement yesterday which said, India is late. You should have negotiated earlier. You only launched that 2nd of April. We've done 5 rounds of talks. 6th round is already on. How many times do we need to say the same thing? We've been discussing, item by item, list by list. We've been discussing each item. What else? This is the best way to negotiate. I think when two countries are talking, that the representatives are talking, that is the best way to go. What else is needed? And I'm glad if our talking to China, or some kind of normalization, that Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, the slogan given decades before, if shades of that is coming to the fore, if that is making US a little more insecure in whatever way and making it talk to us, well, I think it's welcome. But however, from inside, we give as much respect to US. We value the relationship. We are natural allies. One is the largest democracy. One is the oldest democracy. And we are too entwined to each other, Devika. We are so much entwined to each other. There's people-to-people relationship. There is space relationship. ISRO, NASA work together. There are defense ties. There are cultural relationships. I think it is so closely knit that it cannot be seen from the prism of trade at all times, cannot be just measured from the prism of a trade deal. So I think that is where the White House needs to tweak its approach. Not everything can be seen through the trade deal. I mean, we've never seen India-U.S. relations coming to this low. I'm talking of the last few weeks. Now, of course, there is some softening of stancing, and U.S. is increasingly realizing, and we should not forget, Devika, that President Trump's approval rating in America has come down from 53% to 42%. So his approval rating is falling, especially on the economic front. On immigration, he still might be scoring, fair enough. But then as far as economy is concerned, inflation numbers came yesterday, 2.9%. Jobless claims. Look at the jobless claim numbers. So I think he will increasingly start realizing what I mean, as an economist, I've been saying this from day one when we started discussing this topic, that America is heading for that situation. And now the numbers which are emerging from the American economy, they are clearly indicating to the forecast, which I personally had made, that inflation will rise, the jobs are going to be less, and job creation of 22,000 is very alarming. Jobless claims are increasing. In fact, that is a good sign for the Fed to cut down the rates. But overall, I think President Trump, at the back of his mind, I'm sure his advisors are also telling him that, look, your economy is not doing well. You're doing this to your friends. You're doing this to the rest of the world. This might be, self-destructive. So I'm sure he's realizing that. And I think as we progress with the flux of time, he will realize this even more. And I think what India needs to do is to just hang on, be there, leave the doors and windows open for discussions, and be very clear on its stand. We are very firm on our stand. I think for India, that is enough. It's all up to US to navigate. We really don't have to navigate as much, Devika.
Right, absolutely. I'm going to leave the last word with Rabindra Sachdev. Rabindra Sachdev, you've just heard what everyone else has also had to say, but I want to understand from your perspective too. What do we make of, like I said, this report now coming in where we're learning that Donald Trump may be asking the G7 leaders to also increase some pressure in India and China, while he himself and his administration have softened their tone towards India?
So thank you, Devika, and a pleasure to be with such eminent minds. I think we've explored from various angles, so maybe I'll try another. A couple of things, I think, in a big picture. We need to unbox the deal that America is negotiating with us or the tariffs that we are facing. The tariffs that we are facing are one on account of trade, which is the 25%, and the other tariffs that we're facing, 25%, is due to Russian oil. Now, the latest statement to some extent does indicate, so far America was saying, I think that was the point, that they will not discuss even the trade discussions unless India stops buying the oil. But now when there are news coming that they're talking about discussions on trade, etc., to me it seems that maybe they are decoupling the discussions and tariff on trade and the discussions and tariff on Russian oil. One. Secondly, yes, on Russian oil, 25% yet. Trump has been asking European Union 50% to 100% more on China and India. And now you're telling us that he's also telling the G7. So on Russian oil, if the war continues in Ukraine, we might expect realistically, that the tariffs would go up. That's on the oil part. Now coming to the trade part. On the trade part, they're saying we'll discuss. Yeah, sure, we've identified our red lines and all. The big picture, it seems to me, the confusion part of it, it could be deliberate also. As I've been saying, America is or could be seen as playing a good cop, bad cop routine with India. And sure, Trump initially was also being very harsh on India, but then after a bunch of things, maybe he's had a little bit of a rethink, sure. So now what they're fine-tuning is a good cop, bad cop. Trump is the good cop, telling, yes, I want good relations with India, Modi is my best friend, etc., right? But on the other hand, his consiglierates, his cabinet ministers, they are being the bad cops, saying that you do this, you did not do that, you're not that, etc. So I see that routine playing out in a sense. One. Secondly, yes, unboxing of the deal which is out there. So it could mean that discussions could be happening or could start happening on trade. That is on the 25% of the tariffs there. So maybe they could come down to 20. Some red lines of ours will be sacrosanct. Some we will adjust. Some America will adjust. We don't know. But probably it won't be anywhere lower than 15% because EU and several other countries have not. I think only UK has a 10% tariff and others are 15. Whereas before Trump, when he came, the average tariffs were about 2.5%, 3%. So whatever it be, even if it's 15 or 20, it's much higher than the pre-Trump era. Now, the other thing which is being said is that that it's Trump's reaction to India posing up with China and all. And I find it surprising, Sergio Gor's statement, that we have a much warmer relationship with India than India has with China. Of course, yes. There is no comparison between the relationship that India and the US had pre-Trump and what India and China had, or even India and China now even contemplating. We are merely probing each other inch by inch between China and India since Kazan, by the way. Not triggered by Trump, but since a year ago when Modi, Xi Jinping met, and inch by inch, discussion on the boundary issues, trade issues, other issues, etc. But yes, the Trump tariffs have come at a time that even a 1 millimeter of our, walk towards a discussion with China may seem amplified to the Americans. But I think this seems to me a very, shallow understanding to say that, America's relations with India are stronger and much warmer than with China. China was nowhere in the radar. Now that said, even if the trade matter we come to some understanding, mutual, whatever it be, 20%, 21%. And oil tariffs, we don't know what will happen to them. They could grow and all. But the point is that, and yes, everybody is saying that, our relations will go back to normal. Yes, they will go back, but that will be a new normal. I don't think that India will forget this experience of this topsy-turvy ride, which President Trump has opened the gates, opened the floodgates of.
Yes.
But yes, US and India have to, in the long term, be very good, very strong allies. Natural democracy, oldest democracy, woven together, as Sharad is saying. I mean, we have family, diasporas. We have so much interweaving in this mosaic. But unfortunately, I think either we could even say that maybe we've woken up from a slumber also, right? Or we were assuming a certain thing. So this has been, I think, a wake-up call to India, which is fine. And yes, our relationship with America will and must endure and will and must be maximized. But then, as should all our other relationships should be. I think that's another lesson coming out of this. We are looking to now, in any case, we work with as many partners as we can. But I think now we've got a certain sense of urgency and once again a wake-up call that our relations with
Yes.
each server in this matrix should be further strengthened and deepened.
All right. On that note, I've run out of time, but I thank all of our guests for joining us to take this conversation forward.